Welcome students. In the previous classes we have learned about the different types of resources on the different bases, particularly the basis of resource creating factor, the basis of unequal distribution of the resources, and on the basis of ownership of the resources. Today we will going to discuss about the different type of resources on the basis of permanency or stability. So this is fourth type of resource, that's why I write here D. So on the basis of permanency, on the basis of permanency, or you can say on the basis of stability, on the basis of stability. So on the basis of permanency or on the basis of stability, we generally classified the resource into four types. First one, exhaustible resource. Second one, revolving fund resources. Third one, inexhaustible resource. And the fourth one, renewable resources. So these are the four type of resources. One is called the exhaustible resources, one is called revolving fund resources, inexhaustible resources, and renewable resources. First one, the exhaustible resources. Actually these type of resources are distributed in the earth in a fixed quantity. That means such type of resources have a limited stock. If we use the resource, the quantity of the resource decreases for all time. So such kind of resources cannot be revived. So these resources are called as exhaustible resources. Example like coal, example like iron ore. So such kind of resources is called as the exhaustible resources. If we see a line graph, particularly this line graph, x-axis denotes time and y-axis denotes quantity of resource. Now this line graph shows in such way. What is the meaning? Meaning is that increasing of time, continuously decreasing of the quantity of the resources. That's why these resources is called as the exhaustible resources. Like as example, if you think in such way, maybe 1950s, during that time any kind of exhaustible resource presence in the world 6 unit. Clear? 1950s, any kind of resource presence in the world, that means the quantity of the resource may be presence such a 6 unit. Continuously time over come to the period of 2000. During this time, due to the consumption, the resource unit decrease up to 3 unit. So continuously increasing of time, there is a decreases of the quantity of the resources. So such kind of resources is called as the exhaustible resources. Such kind of resources cannot be revived. Clear? So these resources is called as the exhaustible resources. Second one, revolving fund resources. Now see the term revolving fund resources. Actually from there we generally we have to be learned about 3R concept. 3R concept, if you go for the 3R concept, one is reduce, reuse and recycle. So this concept is important here, that's why you can say as the revolving. Now actually the resources are fund in nature, that means they are limited in the world, they cannot be revived, but they can be revolving, they can be reused or recycling. That's why such kind of resources is called as the revolving fund resources. Example like scrap. So scrap iron from where we generally get? We generally get from the iron and steel. So scrap iron from where we get? The iron and steel, basically the rejected iron and steel. Now one thing you should remember, that for iron and steel industry there is needed plenty of raw materials, like as example raw iron ore, coal, dolomite, limestone, bauxite. So if we use this scrap iron, that means the rejected iron and steel that have been recycling and basically formed as a scrap iron. This scrap iron, if it is used for iron and steel industry, so this is decrease the actual raw material. So such kind of resources is basically called as the revolving fund resources. Now see this line graph again, particularly this perspective. Same thing, x-axis denotes time, y-axis denotes quantity of resources. Now the line graph looks like in such way. What is the meaning? Meaning is that continuously increasing of time, the quantity of the resources decreases. Clear? Continuously increasing of time, there the quantity of the resources decreases. Suddenly during this time period, if we use the term 3R concept, if we recycling the resource, and after recycling if we reuse the resources, what we generally do? We are generally reduce the consumption of the resources. If during this time period, if we reduces the consumption of the resources, that time all over the world the storage of the resources becomes stagnant one. So that's why you see this line is parallel to the x-axis or the time period. Again continuously this line go downward. Why? Because one time will occur when we need such kind of resources, so that time we basically consumption of the resource, so this line will go downward. Now third type of resources is inexhaustible resources. Particularly these type of resources do not end after use. You can say such resources are perennial in nature and have a steady flow. So that's why these resources is called as the inexhaustible resources. Example like sunlight, water, air. Now you see this line graph, particularly For inexhaustible resources, if the x-axis denotes the time, y-axis denotes the quantity of resources, so the line graph looks like such kind of steady flow and which is parallel to the x-axis. Why such kind of parallel? You see, if you think about these inexhaustible resources, you should remember these resources do not end. So if you think about 1750s, so the resource up to 5 unit. Clear? Now again come to 1850, resource presence in the world 5 unit. If you come again to 1950s, so resource presence in the world up to 5 units. So that's why this line graph parallel with the time period, and they have basically renewed through his own processes. So that's why these resources is called as the inexhaustible resources. Now the fourth one, the renewable resources. Renewable resources are such resources, you remember, that they are refunded to the nature by alternative way or the method, and basically these resources are renewed by their own way. That's why these resources are called as the renewable resources. Maybe initial time, due to the maximum utilization, these resources decreases, that means the quantity of the resources decreases. After that, again through his own process, the resource quantity again increases and looks like steady. So that's why these resources is called as the renewable resources. Example like fish, example like natural vegetation. So such resources is called as the renewable resources. Now see this line graph, particularly this line graph looks like in such way. X-axis denotes the time, y-axis denotes the quantity of resources. Now the line graph looks like in such way. Why? If you think about 1750s, maybe any kind of resource presence in the wall up to 5 unit. Due to the utilization, come to 1815, that time the resource quantity decreases and that is come up to 4 unit. By renewal process or by alternation process through the nature, these resource fulfill again their quantity and these resource come back again to 5 unit, maybe in 2050. So such kind of resources, that's why it have been called as the renewable resources. Now you see, from the beginning there are basically 4 type of resource on the basis of permanency or stability. What are the 4 type? First of all, that have been the exhaustible resources. Example like coal, iron ore. These resources generally called as the fund resources. Next type of resources is called as the revolving fund resources. Just example like scrap iron from rejected iron and steel. Third one, that is the inexhaustible resources. Example like sunlight, water, air. They are basically perennial in nature. Anytime you can get these resources, unlimited supply. And the fourth one, which is basically the renewable resources. Example like the fishes or the natural vegetation. Maybe due to the utilization, the resource quantity decreases, but through natural processes they fulfill their quantity. So that's why it have been called as the renewable resources.